Hello and welcome to another episode of a weekly Waypoint, where today we are playing some RuneScape 3 and we are training construction, which is not the most thrilling gameplay footage in the world, but once again the series is not really about that. Today we have some sad things to talk about, but I promise you it won't all be sad things that we talk about. There will be other topics as well, my usual goings on. But we will open with one of them. Rooster Teeth Productions is shutting down after more than 21 years. Now I talk about this knowing that I have an episode of Weekly Waypoint called Rotten Teeth Productions, because that company has had its fair share of controversies in the past, and there was a time a few years ago when it came to light that some people had been treated pretty fucking terribly by some of the people I actually liked at that company, and I was really down on them for a while. But ultimately this is not a black and white world. People can change. I tend to believe that people have changed. Whether you think that's naive of me or not, that's my business. And so I continue to tune in and I continue to, I guess, be a fan of Rooster Teeth Productions. More specifically, a fan of the people who actually kind of work there and make content there, not so much the business decisions that place has made over the years. But you have to understand, I started watching Rooster Teeth content back when I think Red vs. Blue Season 5 came out, which, you know, I don't feel like a super old Rooster Teeth fan, but that does make me a super long-lasting Rooster Teeth fan. I felt like I was joining the bandwagon a little bit late there, but goddamn, no, I've been with them for most of what they've done. I was there at the start of Achievement Hunter. I listened to most of the Rooster Teeth podcast over the years. In a very parasocial sense, I feel like I know these people. Gavin Free, Jeff Ramsey, Barbara Dunkelman, Michael Jones. You know, I could just continue listing them off. I've heard them tell so much of their life stories and their perspectives and their ways of thinking over the years through their podcasts. I've, you know, laughed at so many of their jokes. I've enjoyed so much of the content that they've created. So seeing Warner shut down Rooster Teeth and suddenly put all of these people out of a job and kill all of their creative projects, and watching them like literally cry on live stream, like talking about it, that was hard, that was difficult. I did not enjoy that at all, and it's tempting to get angry and wave my fist and say fuck Warner, because yeah, fuck Warner. They're very anti-art. The amount of shit they've been shuttering and deleting just to make a business profit is disgusting. But to be fair, there's also been information about the fact that Rooster Teeth has not been profitable for like 10 years. So I can't be too angry at Warner for this one in particular, but still, fuck Warner, they suck. Rooster Teeth themselves cite growing difficulties within the media industry in terms of like making their business profitable. They used to have like 400 employees or something, and they had whittled themselves down to 150 by the time this has happened, which is mental. And, you know, while this is a shock, it's not a surprise. The writing has been on the wall for a long time. You know, Achievement Hunter got shut down by the people who made it because they wanted to do other things, but you got the sense that people were wrapping things up. Like, the Rooster Teeth podcast was given to an entirely different cast, so it wasn't really the same thing. I know they really wanted people to believe it was the same thing, but it was not. And Red vs. Blue's final season, quite fittingly, is coming out, despite Bernie saying he had no idea that this was coming. You know, the final season will be the last thing that Rooster Teeth really put out there, which is very fitting and sad, and I will watch it. In terms of creative projects, I'm also very concerned about RWBY, which is a show I am very emotionally invested in. I loved Volume 9, despite I think it having some flaws. And, you know, Kerry Shawcross, kind of a guy at the head of RWBY, at least that's the impression I get, was on the live stream talking about like how with every ounce of his being he needs to finish that story, and I'm like, I'm fucking with you, man. God damn. So yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty still. Right now they have 60 days, or they did a few days ago when they were doing the live stream. They said they had 60 days to kind of like shut down production and, you know, roll things up in a neat little, as neatly as they possibly can be. But, you know, there are so many shows I watch by them and so many podcasts I listen to by them, and it's like, what's going to happen to them, you know? Like, obviously the main concern is the people who are losing their jobs and like what they're going to do for financial security from here on out, because the one thing that people are taking away from this is that the Roost podcast network is still remaining active while Warner try and sell it to someone else. But the podcasts that Rooster Teeth make are not part of the Roost podcast network. That's what I've read anyway. So yeah, literally everyone that we know at Rooster Teeth public facing is out of a job, which fucking sucks. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I think I'm still kind of coming to terms with that information. Like, I got teary-eyed watching the live stream, sure, but like I still haven't quite come to terms with the fact that, you know, almost half of the content I consume on the internet, for want of a better way of putting it, is going away soon. And the people who make it, you know, I'm going to have to follow them, and I will follow them as they scatter to the four winds and do their own thing. I am assuming a lot of them are probably going to do like the Patreon model and just like, you know, make their own stuff. And it's probably going to be very similar to the stuff they're making now, just under a different name. But, oh man, it sucks that they're having to do that. My favourite Rooster Teeth production, which is still pretty new in the grand scheme of things, by the way, is the Fuckface podcast. I can't do the bleep with my mouth, I'm very sorry. It's absolutely hilarious if that kind of comedy is your kind of thing. And it's Jeff, Gavin, and their friend Andrew, and usually their producer Eric, and their sound guy Nick as well. If you want a funny podcast to go listen to that one, so long as Warner don't fucking delete it. Anyway, should we talk about some happy things? Or I guess some neutral things. No, we can talk about happy things. Here's a happy thing. Just to balance it out, I saw my uncle over the weekend, and I haven't seen him in almost a decade, and it was wonderful. Was it over the weekend? No, it was in the middle of a week. What am I talking about? It was delightful. He's a very funny man, and I don't really have much else to say about that, but it was just delightful. I just want to put in a nice thing to even out the bad. Now, in terms of what I've been up to this week, in terms of playing games and watching things, there is a channel called Alt Shift X. I don't know if you've heard of it. They talk mostly about George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series, also known as Game of Thrones. They also do some stuff about Dune and occasionally other things. I don't really tune into that content because I'm not familiar with Dune. But they just put out a video called The Real Jon Snow, and it's like 2 hours long. And it is a deep dive into kind of like, you know, talking about Jon's story so far and where his story could go in The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring. And it was like a deep lore dive, and it made me remember just how invested I am in George R.R. Martin's world of Ice and Fire. And you know what you do when you're a Game of Thrones fan, you kind of like pretend it doesn't exist when it's not actually getting you things for you to go and consume. And then someone puts a video out like that and you're like, God damn it, George, please finish the books, please. I feel like I'm more empathetic regarding George R.R. Martin having difficulty finishing the books than most people, but I still have that inside me. I really do worry that George is having a legitimately difficult time finishing the books, and everyone's just screaming at him to finish the books, and eventually it's going to be too late and people aren't going to realise the person we had until it's too late. But maybe that's just where my brain's at right now because of other news we'll get to later. Anyway, remember last week when I was talking about rediscovering survival games, and I was talking about playing Dragon Quest Builders 1, and I was talking about playing Enshrouded? I am still playing both of those games. I also decided to boot up another new world in LEGO Fortnite, which if you don't know is basically LEGO Valheim. And I decided to look at the modifiers and basically turn off the hunger meter, turn off the temperature meter, and make it so when I die I keep all my items. And I also turned off the stamina meter. Out of all of those, I feel like the stamina meter is the only one which wasn't really that necessary to turn off, but I've never really done that in games that let you modify difficulty in custom ways before, because I've always kind of been like, oh, but what if I'm kind of like ruining the core experience for myself? No, from now on, any game that lets me do that, I am doing that with, because it is such a more chill experience. Maybe other players do like having to constantly go and eat and constantly make sure that they've got the right shit for the temperature they're in, so that when it's raining at night they can walk around really slowly and go, this is an immersive experience and I am having fun. But for me, it has made that game so much more playable because I have less shit on my mind to do. The only customizable difficulty feature which is missing, sadly, is I would really like it if they let me have it so that tools never broke, because tools breaking really fucking disrupts my flow of what I'm doing. And I don't know if it's just because I probably have ADHD, or it's just like the way my brain is wired, but I find it really difficult to stay on task in terms of what I'm doing if my tools are constantly breaking and I need to constantly eat and I need to constantly make sure that I'm not freezing to death, you know? Like, I just don't find that fun in these games. Speaking of Fortnite, a new season launched and I've been playing a little bit of that. I'm mentioning it because, you know, new seasons launch all the time. I don't always talk about them. It is a Greek god themed season, and honestly the battle pass is, in my opinion, just full of bangers. Like, I like to pick up the battle pass, I like to work my way through it, and usually I have 2 or 3 skins from the battle pass in my locker per season. This time I'm going to have to make room for every single one of them, because every single one of them is a really cool design, and I'm so just surprised at how good they all are. The only one I would really say is, I keep almost saying 4, Zeus. sorry, Zeus, god of thunder, god of gods, he has a modern kind of like skin variant, which is just like, oh, what if he was just like a soldier in the modern day world, and that's really boring and basic. But the normal Zeus skin does look pretty cool. But you've got Cerberus, and he looks really cool. You've got Medusa, and she looks really cool. You've got Artemis, and she looks so cool. If you haven't popped your head into Fortnite for a while, just go have a look. I have a feeling you'll be impressed. Oh, also, I made another spreadsheet because I love my spreadsheets, and here's one regarding Fortnite. Lastly, I just made a little community post about this, but I'm going to mention it here as well. I have brought this up in the past, I think, but a few years ago, probably about a decade ago now, actually, that's kind of sad to think about, I subscribed to a monthly thing where they would send you 2 hardback, although it wasn't really that impressively hardback, but 2 physical copies of Batman comics. It's called The Legend of Batman by Eagle Moss, and the idea is it collects all the most important Batman stories, and you get them chronologically. I mean, you didn't get them chronologically in the mail, they sent you random ones because of course they did. They wanted you to stay subscribed. But the finished collection, which I do have, is a chronological order of like earliest Batman stories to latest Batman stories in terms of his life story, except that doesn't really make much sense because any DC fan will know that the universe got rebooted several times and they try to pretend that's not what happens, I guess, in this chronology. You've got like 2 different, like, you've got Batman Year 0 and Batman Year 1. You'll know one is the New 52 one and one is a different continuity. Anyway, this is before I really got into comics and realised that this would be a silly thing to do, but I do have all of these physical Batman comics, and I haven't read most of them. I've read some of them, but it is kind of like one of my guiltiest purchases because I, over the course of years, spent a fair amount of money on these, and I never actually read most of them. So what I would love to do is somehow turn them into a YouTube series of me reading through them, kind of giving a summary of what happens in them for people who have not read those comics, so it's not just like a thoughts on, it's also like a getting people up to date with what I'm talking about as I'm talking about it, and kind of take you on that process of reading through those books with me. This is something I've tried to do before though. I think I called it like thoughts per panel or something, and I was literally just like reading it page by page and then stopping and talking into the mic about it, and I burned out on that before the end of the first video, so we're not doing it that way. I will probably just read them and then talk about them, and then I also am toying with the idea of like taking pictures of the book, so I'm not like giving you just raw like comic files because that's, you know, pseudo piratey, but I am showing you examples of like, if I'm like, oh, and I really love this page, I'm taking a photo of it on my phone and showing you the page, just not that, you know, I mean, mostly because I don't have the resources to go and find that page unless I also get a subscription to DC Comics Infinite or something, but I'm not doing that. But if this is a series which interests you, please let me know, because I've been trying to make or trying to figure out how to make YouTube videos around comics for a while now, because it is one of my regular kind of like fixations that I, you know, jump on and jump off, just like classic Doctor Who, which I'm also a little bit stumped on. If any of you are watching who love those videos, they haven't left my mind, don't worry, but I'm a little bit stumped on how to continue, because there are a lot of missing episodes between the one we just watched and the next one that's fully available. But yeah, those are some thoughts I'm having for the channel. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the passing of Akira Toriyama, famed mangaka who created the likes of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z and that entire universe, and also worked on bringing the Dragon Quest games to life visually. He quite surprisingly passed away the March 1st, I think it was, but we only found out about it this week. And I've written a little blog post about it, if anyone's curious. I'll leave that in the description, where I talk a little bit more about my experiences with Akira Toriyama's work. But I did not grow up with Dragon Ball. I didn't even really grow up with Dragon Quest, and yet all the same, the kind of hints of his work that I saw definitely influenced and inspired the kind of games that I did go and play, and the kind of things that I did watch. Like, I'm a huge Bleach fan. That wouldn't have existed, apparently, without Toriyama giving some encouragement to Kubo, and allegedly also putting in a good word for him at the Shonen Jump magazine when he pitched Bleach. And also I'm a huge fan of Naruto, which, you know, it wears its influences on its sleeve. It wouldn't exist without Dragon Ball, obviously. I feel like almost all of like modern shonen owes its lineage to Toriyama's work. But that man was not just his incredible work, he was also a man who had a family, and you know, I can completely understand them not releasing this info for a week to allow his family to kind of grieve him for who he is outside of his fame and his work. There has been a massive outpouring of love and grief online from so many places and so many people, and like it just led me to think like, man, this guy wasn't a national treasure, he was an international treasure, you know? As much as the world has been united on anything, I think the world is pretty united on the fact that Akira Toriyama was one of the good ones. Obviously, I'm in the middle of playing through Dragon Quest VII and Dragon Quest Builders right now, so I'm very much enjoying a lot of the work that he visually designed or otherwise inspired. And last year I read through, not last year, 2022, gosh, time flies, doesn't it? 2022, I read through the original manga for Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, and I had a really fun time doing that. And obviously it's incredibly sad that he's gone, but I just count us lucky that we had the opportunity to have someone so talented and so light-hearted in our midst. But yeah, that's obviously you were probably expecting it, that's the second super sad thing I wanted to talk about this week. As you can see in the video though, I just got 90 construction, so you know, there's another happy thing to balance out the sad. I'm considering going for untrimmed construction skill cape on this guy. I think it actually might be possible with all the boosts to construction XP that exist in RuneScape 3 these days. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you in whatever I make next.